A new study is shining a spotlight on something Black Canadians are experiencing every day. In a 6-year study called the Black Experience Project, 80% of Black people in Toronto said they frequently experience microaggressions. These are small, sometimes subtle acts of discrimination. Sometimes people may not even be aware that they're doing it. But for someone on the receiving end, they can add up in a corrosive way. To break down how and why this is happening, we're speaking with Marva Wisdom. She's the director of the Black Experience Project, and Hadiya Roderique. She's a freelance journalist and lawyer. Good to have you both here for this discussion this morning.
Thanks for having us.
All right, Marva, what are some of the common microaggressions that people recorded in the Black Experience Project?
Some includes, where are you from? Where are you really from? And those comments are just so regular. Or folks who feel comfortable commenting on someone's hair or their hairstyles.
Like, what are some of the comments?
The comments would be, oh, that's interesting, and they feel like they want to touch. So microaggression is not only the words that are said, but it's also behaviors. It's the look that you get, or it's walking into a store or walking along the street if you're a young male and someone walks across to the other side of the street. You walk into a store, immediately you're being followed. I mean, those are things that 80% of our young people especially, this happens to them on a regular basis.
Has any of these things happened to either of you?
For me, absolutely, yes. From the time I was quite young all the way through, and unfortunately to my kids who were born in Canada as well, people who say, where are you from? But they go one step further into overt aggression by saying, go back to where you came from. And they were in elementary school at the time.
I've been mistaken as an assistant when I was a lawyer wearing a full suit, or, you know, if I say, where are you from? And I say, I'm from Mississauga, they're like, no, where are you really from? Like, where are you? Implying that I'm not really Canadian. So these things do kind of add up.
Some of those experiences you recorded in this great article in the Globe and Mail. It's called Being Black on Bay Street. You detailed some of your experiences in a professional environment. How did you find? Give us some examples of how your race was demonstrated back to you in a professional environment.
Well, the example with being mistaken for an assistant happened in my first week on the job. So
and what do you say at that point?
Well, I said, they asked, you know, who do you work for? And I said, well, I'm for the labor and employment group. And they're like, who's your lawyer? And I'm like, me.
Wow.
And they're like, I'm an associate. And then I was wearing a suit, I had a briefcase, and then you could tell, like, she blushed, she realized that she'd mistaken me for someone different, hadn't kind of even looked down, just had looked at my face. Or someone saying, oh, well, I didn't think you'd want to go skiing, like black people don't ski. So kind of it's reinforcing that you're an other or you're kind of different.
Those are both of your experiences, and you know, a colleague of ours, Marcy Ian, recently wrote an article that's published in today's Globe and Mail about her very recent experience about being stopped by a police officer outside her house, as she documents for the 3rd time in 8 months. I want to put up a little bit from that article. The stop signal at my daughter's school is half a kilometer away. Why wasn't I pulled over there? Why did the police officer, meaning he, follow me home? Why, after seeing the address on my driver's license, did he still ask if I lived at my home? Are these reflective of some of the experiences of people, possibly not just in the city of Toronto, but I would say in cities across Canada?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I live in Guelph. My children, my son was born in Guelph, my daughter was born in Mississauga. And my son, as soon as he started driving, he started being pulled over. Now, I was volunteering as a victim services volunteer within the police station. That's where the office was located. So they knew me and knew my family well. My son, after being pulled over numerous times, and the police followed him home once, and the police officer said, do you live here? And he said, you would know because you would have had to run my plates. You've been following me so long. My son ended up going to the police station and filing a report and said, I'm going to file this and make this very formal if I don't stop being followed. So this is a regular happening, not just within the GTA, but outside of the GTA. And indeed, the Black Experience Project, one of the interests is interest right across the country. We did a report, a presentation in Kitchener-Waterloo, very keenly interested because the experiences are quite similar.
Let me ask you both this. I often say to people that until you felt the sting of racism, you don't know how painful it can be. But does it feel the same? Does a microaggression feel the same as an overt expression of racism?
For me, I find them to be worse Because at least with an overt act, I can kind of chalk it up to that person being a racist. It's a lot easier to kind of dismiss their thinking. But a lot of the times with microaggressions, you're not even, you know something's wrong with a comment, and sometimes it even takes you a while to figure out what's wrong with the comment, what's driving the comment, what stereotype is driving the comment, and it kind of just weighs on your mind in a way that the others don't. And they happen with such regularity and frequency that there is research that shows that subtle racism is just as bad, if not worse, in terms of your mental health and other effects than for an individual.
Anyway, as our country continues these discussions about race, and they can sometimes be uncomfortable for certain groups of people, particularly maybe white communities have a harder time with this type of discussion because it's not a discussion that happens often in their homes. So then looking for solutions, if you are unaware that you may be perpetrating a microaggression, what are some ways to change thought, to do the double think of action? What are some solutions?
I think reflecting, if someone tells you that something you said has caused them harm, I think reflecting on your words, asking them questions is always a good idea. People aren't afraid to talk about these things with you. We know that often these aren't with malicious intent, and we're so sort of ingrained in a certain culture and a sort of dominant white supremacy that sometimes people don't even notice that they're saying these things. But there is research that shows for the people who are the receivers of microaggressions, talking about it actually is helpful for your mental health. So confronting it, we seem to think that confronting racism is a bad thing and talking about racism is a bad thing, but research actually shows the opposite.
And I would add to that, I think that's really true, and our research shows that as well. I think one of the things that we need to add to that as well is that for those who hear that microaggression has occurred or that you're feeling a certain way, don't dismiss it. That's the other thing. You don't have the empathy. Others say you're overreacting or that's not what this person meant. And the person who is the perpetrator becomes the victim because the person who is on the receiving end is overreacting. So if you're a bystander, you need to also be a part of the solution and have those conversations and start those conversations really early on in life and continue with those conversations throughout education. I believe that this is something that should be threaded through our educational system in order for real change to happen.
It's an important conversation to have. I want to thank you both for sharing your experiences here with us here on Your Morning.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie.